Introduction: The myth of bad sales. It's not the market, it's you. Many salespeople believe their problem is the product, the price, or the market situation. They tell themselves that things are tough, that customers are more demanding, or that the competition is unfair. But meanwhile, other salespeople, with the same product, in the same market, with the same prices, are closing sales every day. The difference isn't external. It's in how you think, how you speak, how you listen, and how you connect. Most of the time, you're not selling poorly because the market is bad. You're selling poorly because you're selling poorly. And that's excellent news. Because if the problem is you, so is the solution. The truly professional salesperson doesn't look for excuses. They look for blind spots. They look for those small actions that, when repeated, generate big results. They understand that every sale begins long before the customer says a word. It begins in their mindset. It begins in their way of seeing the world. Because selling isn't a mechanical act. Selling is a profoundly human act. It involves understanding how the mind of the person in front of you works, what their fears are, what their frustrations are, what they dream of, what they want to avoid, and what they're willing to hear. If you don't understand this, everything you say is noise. If you understand it, every word you use can be a key. The first big mistake in sales is believing your job is to convince. This mindset puts you in a fighting position. You feel you have to win, and to win, the customer has to lose. But sales aren't a battle. They're a partnership. Your job isn't to impose a decision, it's to illuminate a path. You're not there to close a transaction. You're there to open a transformation. The customer doesn't need you as a salesperson. They need you as a guide. Someone who understands their problem better than they do. Someone who clearly shows them how to get from where they are to where they want to be. When you understand this, you stop selling products and start selling desired futures. That changes everything. Ask yourself this question right now. Why should someone buy from you and not someone else? If your answer is based only on technical features, superficial benefits, or competitive prices, you're competing at the lowest level. Because what truly moves people isn't logic, it's emotion. The decision to purchase is emotional. Justification is rational. First they feel, then they think. So, if you don't connect with their emotions, you'll never make their decision. Learning to sell is, in essence, learning to create emotions of trust, certainty, and hope. Emotions that make the customer feel that what you offer isn't just another option. It's the only option that makes sense. Most salespeople talk too much. They try to impress. They recite features. They focus on what their product can do. But the customer doesn't want to hear that. The customer wants to know one thing. How does this improve my life? If you can't answer that question clearly, you're not selling, you're informing. And information doesn't drive decisions. Transformation does. That's why great salespeople don't sell objects or services. They sell results. They sell solutions. They sell visible, desirable, real changes. Stop talking about yourself. Start talking about them. Stop talking about what you know. Start asking what they need. The average salesperson fears silence. They want to fill every space with words. But the best salespeople understand that silence, well used, is a tool of power. Because in silence, the customer reflects. In silence, the customer reveals. And in silence, you can hear what really matters. Learn to be silent to understand. Learn to observe to read signals. Learn to ask questions that open doors, not close possibilities. In sales, the questioner dominates. The listener wins. And the one who truly understands closes without pressure. Forget for a moment what you think you know about selling. What you learned by watching others repeat the same thing without results. Forget the need to impress. Because in the real world, what sells the most is clarity. Clarity in your message, in your energy, in your intention. When you speak from an authentic place, without pressure, without need, without anxiety about closing, the client feels it. People don't just buy what you say. They buy how you say it. They buy the security you convey. And that security can only come from one thing. Knowing that you're not there to manipulate, you're there to serve. The salesperson who serves with power closes with ease. He who gives value first receives value later. And he who understands the customer better than his competition always has an advantage. This isn't a game of tricks, magic phrases, or rigid scripts. It's a game of human understanding. If you want to sell more, understand more. If you want to influence more, connect more. If you want to close more, listen more. Because selling isn't about shouting louder, it's about speaking more clearly. It's not about saying more things, it's about saying the right things. And you only discover those things when you stop thinking about selling and start thinking about transforming. If every time you talk to a client you're thinking about commission, you're on the wrong wavelength. Your focus shouldn't be on closing, it should be on connecting. Because when you connect, closing happens on its own. You don't need to push, you just need to show clearly. Most sales that don't close are because the client never felt you understood them. They never felt you were there to help them. They just felt you wanted to sell. And that, today more than ever, drives them away. New clients don't want to be persuaded. They want to be understood. And those who understand, dominate. From now on, every conversation you have with a client is an opportunity to provide clarity, value, and direction. It doesn't matter if you're selling insurance, courses, cars, services, or intangibles. What you're selling, at its core, is a promise of change. And your job is to show that change is possible, real, and achievable with you. That's the sale that transforms. The one that doesn't feel like pressure, but rather a logical and emotional decision at the same time. The sale that isn't a fight, but an agreement. The sale that isn't a closing, but a new beginning. And that's the sale you're about to master, if you're willing to let go of excuses and take full responsibility for your results. But before continuing, tell us from which city you're listening to this audiobook, and if this message resonates with you, subscribe to the channel now. This way, you'll be sure not to miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer every day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Chapter 1. The most common mistake of the average salesperson. One of the most common and costly mistakes the average salesperson makes is thinking that selling is all about talking. The more they talk, the more they think they're making progress. They shower the customer with information, features, technical details, figures, and product benefits, as if words alone had the power to close a sale. But that belief is a silent trap. Because sales don't happen when the salesperson talks a lot, but when the customer feels understood. And that only happens when the salesperson listens, observes, and adapts their message to the customer's emotional reality. Talking too much isn't just ineffective, it's counterproductive. Because it saturates, disconnects, and bores. Every extra word is a missed opportunity to connect. Every attempt to impress with technical knowledge without context is a step toward rejection. The human mind doesn't respond to excess data. It responds to emotional impact. And that's not achieved by talking a lot. It's achieved by saying just the right amount, at the right time, and in the right way. The salesperson who believes that talking more means selling better falls into the illusion of protagonism. They become the center of the conversation, forgetting that the true protagonist is the customer. And when the customer feels the conversation revolves around the salesperson, they tune out. No one wants to be part of a transaction where they don't feel seen, heard, or understood. A salesperson who talks too much conveys anxiety, insecurity, and a lack of strategy. On the other hand, a salesperson who listens, who pauses, who allows for silence, and who asks questions with purpose, projects confidence and control. Because selling well isn't about talking a lot. It's about communicating precisely. It's not about demonstrating what you know. It's about demonstrating that you understand what the customer needs. Another equally common and damaging mistake is selling the product instead of selling the transformation. Most salespeople are trained to describe what they're selling. The features, the specifications, the benefits, the components. But that's not what the customer is buying. No one buys life insurance for the coverage. No one buys a gym for the machines. No one buys a cell phone for the megapixel count. People buy what they think they'll get from that product. They buy the excitement, the security, the status, the comfort, the peace of mind, the validation. What the product is matters far less than what the product makes people feel. And if as a salesperson, you don't understand that difference, you'll continue selling from the surface, without touching the desire that drives the real purchase decision. Selling a product is easy. Anyone can do it. You just need to memorize the features. But selling transformation requires emotional intelligence, empathy, and vision. It requires looking beyond the object or service and visualizing the impact it can have on the customer's life. That's why great salespeople don't sell the what, they sell the why. They don't talk about features, they talk about the future. They don't explain the product, they reveal what the customer can achieve with it. That's the difference between a salesperson who generates occasional transactions and one who creates lasting relationships. Because when the customer feels that you're not just selling them something, but helping them transform, they trust you, come back to you, and recommend you. Many salespeople fail because they don't understand this difference and fall into empty conversations. They think they're being persuasive when in reality they're just informing. And information without emotion doesn't generate action. A customer can know everything about your product and still not buy, because they haven't felt it will change their life. That's why sales seem secure and then fizzle out. Because the salesperson never took the time to find out what the customer really wants. And without that, any proposal sounds the same as the others. It doesn't stand out, it doesn't resonate, it doesn't convert. There are hundreds of examples of sales failed by this flawed approach. A technology salesperson who proudly displays the specifications of their system, but never asks what specific problem the client wants to solve. A real estate agent who talks endlessly about square footage, finishes, and location, but doesn't stop to understand what kind of life the family wants to build in that home. A coach or consultant who repeats the benefits of their program, but never investigates what internal challenge their prospect has, what holds them back, what drives them crazy, what they dream of changing. They all believe they're selling well because they have a good pitch, but that pitch doesn't reach the client's heart. And without heart, there is no decision. Selling is a process of deep connection. It requires stopping, pausing, and looking at the customer not as just another number, but as a story in progress. It requires asking questions that reveal the invisible. Asking not about the obvious, but about what hurts, what makes them uncomfortable, what they deeply desire. And once you discover that, align your proposal with the transformation the customer desires. When you achieve that, you don't have to convince. The customer feels that your solution is the answer they were looking for. And that's when the natural, fluid, resistance-free sale occurs. So if your sales are stagnant, don't rush to change your product, your presentation, or your logo. Change your approach. Stop talking so much. Start asking better questions. Stop explaining your product. Start figuring out what your customer wants to achieve. Let go of the need to impress. Make the decision to transform. That's the difference between an average salesperson who talks for the sake of talking and an extraordinary one who listens to make an impact. It's not about how much you say. It's about how much you make people feel. Because at the end of the day, people don't remember everything you said, but they never forget how you made them feel. And that, more than any technique, is what truly sells. Chapter 2. Client Psychology. When a customer is faced with a purchasing decision, their mind isn't just evaluating what they see or hear. It's processing emotions, memories, fears, desires, and even insecurities. Behind every purchase lies a set of invisible motivations that act like silent forces. Some buy out of fear of being left behind, others out of a desire for social validation, and still others because they want to feel in control. Even the simplest purchases are loaded with emotional meaning. Understanding what's really going through the mind of the buyer is the first step to becoming a high-level salesperson. It's not enough to know the product. You have to know the person. Because the customer isn't buying the object. They're buying what that object represents to them. And that can vary radically from one person to another. The common mistake is to assume that all customers think alike or buy for logical reasons. But most purchasing decisions are deeply irrational, even if they are later justified with rational arguments. The buyer's mind is a battleground between what they want and what they fear, between what they want to achieve and what they want to avoid. If, as a salesperson, you don't understand this dynamic, You'll continue to focus on the superficial, on the visible, and miss the most powerful thing: the true reason behind the purchase. The key is to look beyond the words. Listen to what isn't said. Identify body language, silences, contradictions, gestures. Each customer reveals much more than meets the eye, if you know where to look. One of the biggest obstacles to achieving this deep understanding is the salesperson's own ego. Many salespeople are more concerned with sounding intelligent than being helpful. They want to demonstrate expertise, authority, and mastery. And while that may seem like a good strategy, the truth is it ends up alienating the customer. Because when the salesperson speaks from their ego, they turn the sale into a competition. And the customer doesn't want to compete. They want to feel understood. They don't want to be in front of someone who knows more than they do. They want to be in front of someone who respects them, listens to them, and is genuinely interested in their situation. The salesperson's ego creates an invisible barrier, because it conveys judgment, urgency, and superiority. But effective selling is born from empathy, from a genuine desire to help. Leaving ego out of the conversation is one of the most powerful and difficult acts for a salesperson. It requires humility, presence, and maturity. It requires stopping thinking about the close, the commission, or impressing, and starting to think about serving, discovering, and accompanying. When the customer feels that, they lower their defenses. They open up. They trust. Because they don't feel like they're being sold to, they feel like they're being helped. And it's in that state of mind that decisions are made most easily. The salesperson who manages to create that space doesn't need to push. They just need to guide. Identifying a customer's hidden motivations is an art. They're not obvious. They're not in what they initially say. Often, they're not even clear to the customer themselves. That's why the salesperson must act as an explorer. They must ask questions that aren't obvious. Not just, what are you looking for? But, what are you trying to change in your life with this? Not just, what interests you? But, what worries you about not making a decision now? True motivations are hidden behind logical language. And they only emerge when the salesperson knows how to create a space of trust. People reveal what they feel only when they feel safe. And that doesn't happen with a polished pitch. It happens with authentic listening, with intelligent questions, with well-used pauses, with the energy of service. There are deep motivations that drive action. The desire for recognition, the need for security, the yearning for freedom, the fear of failure, the desire to belong, the need to control, the drive to excel. Every client has their own set of values and priorities. That's why you can't sell to everyone the same way. What's important to one may be irrelevant to another. And only through dialogue, exploration, and empathy is it possible to discover what truly moves each person. That motivation is the lever that activates the sale. If you find it, you can align your proposal with it, and then everything makes sense for the client. If you don't find it, you'll be shooting in the air, hoping something will work. Real pain is also hidden. Few people tell you up front what their deepest fear or greatest frustration is. But that pain is there, guiding their decisions, conditioning their thoughts. Some people buy to avoid feeling like a failure. Others buy to prove something to others. Some buy out of fear of being unprepared. Others out of fear of being left behind. If, as a salesperson, you can tap into that pain, not to manipulate, but to show understanding, you are in a position of real influence. Because now the customer feels that you understand their inner world. And that's worth more than any technical argument. Selling is a psychological process before it is a commercial process. If you understand the buyer's mind, you can guide the conversation gently and precisely. You can anticipate their objections. You can speak their emotional language. You can show them how your solution not only solves a technical problem but also relieves an internal tension. And that is what builds a deep connection. Selling is not about transmitting information. Selling is about transmitting understanding. And understanding only occurs when the salesperson steps outside themselves and enters the customer's world with curiosity, respect, and purpose. The average salesperson reacts to what they see. The exceptional salesperson interprets what they can't see. That's the real game. Don't stay on the surface. Don't settle for standard answers. Go deeper. Ask better questions. Truly listen. Pay attention to the details others ignore. And, above all, stop assuming. Because every customer is a unique story. And when you treat that story with depth, strategy, and empathy, the sale becomes inevitable. Not because of pressure, but because of connection. Because deep down, we all want the same thing: to be understood, to be guided, and to feel like we're making the best decision. If you manage to elicit that in every conversation, you'll never have to chase customers again. They'll come to you because of how you make them feel. And that, in the world of sales, is real power. Chapter 3. Sales are not about products, they are about problems. In the real world of sales, those who understand that the customer isn't buying a product, but rather seeking to solve a problem, are the ones who close with consistency and authority. The most common mistake is starting a conversation trying to sell something without having understood what the person in front of you really needs. It's like a doctor prescribing medicine before making a diagnosis. No one would trust a doctor who doesn't ask questions, who doesn't explore symptoms, who doesn't investigate the patient's history. However, that's exactly what thousands of salespeople do every day. They offer solutions before understanding the real problem. Selling like a doctor means listening deeply, asking the right questions, understanding the root of the situation, and only then presenting a recommendation. When you sell from a diagnosis, your proposal becomes inevitable. But when you sell from an assumption, what you offer loses power, clarity, and emotional connection. Selling isn't about starting by talking, it's about starting by asking questions. It's not about impressing, it's about investigating. A salesperson who approaches a conversation with a diagnostic mindset doesn't behave like a promoter, but like an expert. Someone who wants to understand, not simply convince. Someone who is interested first in the customer, not the closing. This shift in focus transforms the entire energy of the conversation. The customer lowers their guard because they don't feel pressured, but supported. They don't perceive you as trying to sell them something. They perceive you as trying to help them clarify something. And when a customer feels that you understand their situation better than anyone, you've already won their attention, their trust, and, often, their decision. Before even mentioning a benefit of your product, you need to ask a series of key questions that allow you to build the right context. What is the main problem you're facing right now in this area? What have you tried to do to solve it? What result did you hope to achieve but didn't? How long have you been carrying this problem? How does it affect your daily life, your emotions, your results? What would happen if this continues for the next 6 months? What would you achieve if you could solve this today? Each of these questions is designed to bring to light the real problem, not the apparent one. Because what the customer says at the beginning isn't always what really hurts them. And often, not even they are clear about what they're looking for. But if you ask the right questions, they can discover it with you. And that shared discovery is one of the most powerful moments in any sales process. Questions aren't just informational tools. They're instruments of influence. Every time you ask a good question, you're guiding the customer's thinking. You're helping them organize their mental chaos. You're allowing them to verbalize things they'd only felt but didn't understand until that moment. And when a person puts their pain or frustration into words, they automatically feel like they're making progress. That creates a bond with you. It positions you not as someone who wants to sell, but as someone who helps them think. And that's the most influential role you can have in sales. The mental guide, the clarifier, the decision facilitator. Furthermore, when you ask before offering, you have the ability to personalize your message. You no longer speak generically, you speak specifically. You don't say, "This product has this advantage." You say, "This solves exactly what you just described." You don't say, "This works for everyone." You say, "This fits what you're experiencing right now." And that personalization is the key to urgency. Because when the customer feels that your proposal is precisely aligned with their problem, the desire to act grows naturally. Urgency isn't created with pressure, it's created with precision. And that precision comes from diagnosis. Language that sparks interest and urgency isn't pushy or exaggerated. It's consequence-focused. Instead of saying, "This product is great," say, "This prevents you from wasting more time with solutions that don't work." Instead of saying, "This is a great opportunity," say, "This solves exactly the frustration you've been carrying around for months." Interest is sparked when the customer feels you're speaking their language. Urgency emerges when they realize that the cost of not acting is greater than the cost of acting. Your job isn't to push, it's to illuminate that hidden cost. To show what happens if they don't change. To make the price of staying where they are tangible. Selling like a doctor doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means having a method. It means not falling into the anxiety of wanting to speak before understanding. It means creating a conversation that's focused on the customer, not the product. It means moving with the certainty that each person has a problem that needs solving, and that your job is to uncover it, not assume it. It's a professional, mature, strategic stance. And when you adopt that stance, you realize that selling isn't about manipulating emotions, but about raising awareness. Because often, the customer doesn't buy because they haven't understood what it's costing them to not resolve their situation. And you can be that mirror that helps them see clearly. A thorough diagnosis not only improves your closings, it improves your reputation, your trust, and your connection with each person you serve. Because not everyone will buy from you today, but everyone will remember how you made them think. And often, that memory is what keeps them coming back. A salesperson who diagnoses is a salesperson who leaves a mark. Because while others talk non-stop, they listen, investigate, discover, and propose only when they're certain that what they're offering makes sense. That's the sale that transcends. The sale that transforms. The sale that doesn't feel like a sale, but rather like an expected solution. And that's the sale you can master if you decide to stop selling products and start solving real problems. Chapter 4. The fear that makes you lose sales. One of the deepest fears salespeople carry, although many won't admit it, is the fear of rejection. That uncomfortable feeling, that emptiness you feel when a customer says no, when they don't respond, when they seem indifferent or even critical. That no may seem like just a word, but for many, it triggers a chain of thoughts that sabotages their confidence. I'm not good enough for this. I did something wrong. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good salesperson. And the most dangerous thing isn't the rejection itself, but the personal meaning each salesperson attributes to it. Because the problem isn't being told no. It's that you believe that no speaks about you as a person. When you confuse a sales rejection with a personal rejection, every sales attempt becomes a threat to your self-esteem. And from that state, it's impossible to sell with clarity, with power, with enthusiasm. Rejection isn't a judgment on your worth. It's not an offense. It's not a sign that you've failed. It's, in most cases, a natural response to uncertainty, to the client's fear, to the wrong timing, or to a lack of alignment between your proposal and their current situation. No isn't an attack. It's part of the journey. Every great salesperson you admire today has heard thousands of no's before each big yes. The difference lies in how they interpreted it. The average salesperson is paralyzed by rejection. They become frustrated, withdrawn, and demotivated. The professional salesperson uses it as feedback, as momentum, as part of the game. They understand that every no brings them closer, not further away. Because every interaction leaves clues, learning, and clarity. If you're willing to see it that way, the fear of rejection transforms into respect for the process. Overcoming the fear of no requires a profound internal change. And that change begins with your mental dialogue. What do you say to yourself when someone doesn't buy? What story do you build in your mind? Do you speak harshly, critically, or hopelessly? Or do you speak to yourself like a professional who knows that every conversation is an opportunity for growth? Your thoughts after a rejection are more important than the rejection itself, because they determine your energy for the next call, the next meeting, the next opportunity. And if you don't take care of that internal conversation, you'll be carrying the emotional weight of a previous no into your next interaction, contaminating your presence, your tone, your approach. This creates a cycle of silent insecurity that the customer senses, even if they don't say it. A powerful technique for overcoming no paralysis is emotional dissociation. It means understanding that no doesn't belong to you. It's not a reflection of you as a human being, not even as a professional. It's simply a response to a specific circumstance. You can visualize it as if the no were falling in front of you, but not within you. You observe it, analyze it, respect it, but don't absorb it. This allows you to maintain the objectivity, energy, and clarity necessary to continue. Another key mental resource is to reinterpret rejection as a filter. Not everyone is your client. Not everyone is ready. Not everyone values what you offer. And that's okay. Because when you understand that your job isn't to force anyone, but to find those who are aligned, rejection stops hurting. It becomes part of the natural process of finding the right ones. It's also vital to work with visualization. Before a call, a meeting, or a presentation, visualize the possibility of a no and your positive reaction to it. Imagine listening calmly, with presence, with professionalism. Imagine responding with gratitude, with interest, with elegance. By training your mind to normalize rejection, you reduce its emotional power over you. It no longer takes you by surprise. It no longer hits you hard. It becomes a predicted, expected, processed event. And from there, you can continue selling without fear. The resilience of a professional salesperson isn't a matter of brute force, but of mental training. It's built day by day, conversation after conversation, thought after thought. It means being clear about your worth, regardless of the external response. It means remembering that you are not your results. That a failed sale doesn't erase your ability, your dedication, your progress. Resilience is also built through community. Talking with other salespeople, sharing experiences, normalizing difficult moments. Because when you think you're the only one failing, the weight multiplies. But when you understand that everyone goes through rejections, that everyone doubts sometimes, that everyone feels fear at some point, you regain the perspective and energy to move forward. Another key aspect of resilience is a focus on continuous improvement. Every no is an opportunity to fine-tune your message, improve your assessment, and polish your communication. After each rejection, ask yourself, what did I learn? What signals did I miss? What could I say differently next time? This way, you turn rejection into a teacher, not an enemy. And when rejection becomes a teacher, every interaction adds value. There is no longer loss, only evolution. Selling from resilience is selling from emotional stability. It's entering each conversation without attachment, but with intention. It's knowing that your value doesn't depend on a sale, but on your ability to remain steadfast, present, and authentic in any response. That stability is felt. It's transmitted. And customers notice it. Because when a salesperson isn't desperate, they project confidence. And when you project confidence, you inspire confidence. And confidence, more than any argument, is what truly sells. The fear of no isn't completely eliminated, but it can be mastered. And when you do, you become a free salesperson. Free from judgment, anxiety, and emotional dependence on the outcome. Free to focus on what's important. Serving, guiding, and proposing with power. That inner freedom is the most powerful weapon in the world of sales. Because it allows you to move forward when others stop. To learn where others get frustrated. To persist where others give up. And over time, close more, influence more, and transform more lives, starting with your own. Chapter 5. Words that sell. Words are tools. In sales, every word you choose can bring you closer or further away from the close. It's not about talking for the sake of talking. It's about knowing exactly what to say to open the customer's mind, to build trust, to awaken desire, to eliminate friction. There are phrases that open doors because they generate emotional connection, mental clarity, and inner security. And there are phrases that slam them shut because they trigger defenses, generate doubts, or trigger unconscious rejection. The average salesperson improvises their language. The professional salesperson tunes it like an instrument. They understand that they are not selling a product, they are selling an idea, a possibility, an emotion. And ideas are sold with verbal precision, not with an excess of information. A phrase as simple as, "I'm going to show you how this fits exactly what you need," has a completely different impact than, "I'm going to explain what this product does." The former invites, the latter imposes. The former connects with the customer, the latter revolves around the product. The same applies to expressions like, "This is perfect for you," which sound presumptuous, versus others like, "Based on what you told me, I think this might make sense for you," which convey humility, active listening, and personalized attention. The right words are gentle but firm, clear but human, persuasive without being aggressive. It's a delicate balance, but when you master it, sales conversations become fluid, natural, and powerful. One of the most common mistakes is using technical language with clients who aren't interested in details, but rather in results. Saying, "This software has native integration with multiple API platforms," may sound impressive, but if the client isn't technically savvy, you're just confusing them. On the other hand, saying, "This will save you hours each week because it connects directly to your current systems," translates that feature into a clear benefit. Sales words don't focus on what the product is, but on how it feels. They don't describe the function, they describe the transformation. Because what the client wants isn't to know everything about your offer. They want to know what will change in their life if they say yes. Furthermore, knowing how to use the right language when faced with an objection is one of the most powerful skills of an influential salesperson. When a client says, "It's too expensive," the average response is to justify the price. But the professional salesperson turns the objection into an opportunity to dig deeper. Instead of saying, "But it has many advantages," they say, "I understand why you see it that way. May I ask you what makes it seem expensive compared to what you want to achieve?" This phrase doesn't defend, it inquires. It doesn't pressure, it explores. And in that exploration, the client often realizes they're comparing a price without yet understanding the true value. Objections aren't walls, they're hidden doors. And every door opens with the right key: a well-posed question, a well-placed phrase, a well-used pause. Another powerful technique is to reframe negative language in positive terms without losing authenticity. When a client says, "I don't have time," the salesperson can respond, "That's precisely what this system solves." It gives you time back each week to focus on what really matters. Or if they say, "I'm already working with another provider," you can say, "That shows you value this area. Would you like to see if there's a way to further improve the results you're already getting?" You're not negating the objection, you're framing it as a bridge to a new possibility. That's the difference between reacting and responding, between pushing and leading. Persuasive verbal communication isn't just about pretty talk. It's about useful talk. It's about the words the client needs to hear, in the way they need to hear them, at the exact moment they're ready to receive them. It's about understanding that every word generates an emotional reaction. Saying, "Do you have any questions?" sounds good, but it can invite resistance. Saying, "What part wasn't clear enough?" opens the door for collaboration. Saying, "Are you interested?" can sound like a forced closure. Saying, "Do you think this fits with what you're looking for?" invites reflection without pressure. Each variation changes the tone, the pace, the direction of the conversation. The use of metaphors is also a powerful tool. Comparing your solution to something the client already understands creates an immediate connection. Saying, "This works like a GPS. You set the destination and it guides you step by step," is more powerful than explaining a methodology in abstract terms. Metaphors spark mental images, and images are the language of the subconscious. When you speak in metaphors, your message penetrates deeper, stays with you longer, and generates greater impact. Great salespeople master the art of translating complex concepts into simple stories. Because stories sell more than lists of features. Stories excite, engage, and activate the client's imagination. Another key element in sales language is the strategic use of silence. Knowing when to be silent. Knowing when to let the client think, feel, and mentally complete the idea. Silence after a powerful phrase is like the final period after a grand declaration. It emphasizes, underlines, and adds weight. A common mistake is to speak immediately after making a proposal. But if you learn to remain silent, maintaining eye contact, waiting without anxiety, the client will often process it internally and say, "I'm interested," without you saying another word. That's silent influence, the kind that doesn't shout, but convinces. It's also crucial to avoid words that trigger alarm or resistance. Phrases like, "I guarantee you," "Believe me," "I never fail," or "This is the best you'll find," can sound exaggerated and trigger skepticism. On the other hand, phrases like, "Based on my experience with other clients in your same situation," or "I can show you what has worked for people facing a similar challenge," convey authority without arrogance, experience without imposition. In sales, The winner isn't the one who sounds the most confident, the one who sounds the most credible. And credibility is built with real, clear language, without unnecessary embellishment. Mastering the words that sell means training in the art of verbal intention. It's not about having a rigid script, but rather having inner clarity about what you want to provoke in the customer. Openness, reflection, connection, decision. And then translating that intention into phrases that guide, not force. That inspire, not push. That accompany, not pressure. Because sales aren't a war of arguments. They're a dance of emotions. And in that dance, each word is a step. If you choose each step well, the customer doesn't feel dragged. They feel guided. And that guidance is what leads them to the close with confidence, enthusiasm, and, above all, conviction. Because when you use the right words, you're no longer selling. You're helping them decide. And that, deep down, is what the customer has always been looking for. Chapter 6. Consultative Selling. Your customer needs a guide, not an expert. At the heart of modern sales is a truth that transforms everything. Your customer doesn't need an expert who dazzles them with technical jargon. They need a guide who accompanies them with clarity, empathy, and direction. The traditional model of the salesperson as a know-it-all figure is dying. People no longer look for someone who has all the answers. They look for someone who knows how to ask the right questions. Because in a world where information abounds, value isn't in the data you provide, but in the guidance you offer. A guide doesn't position themselves above the customer, but at their side. They don't impose solutions. They discover them alongside them. They don't boast. They connect. They don't impress. They accompany. That's the difference between a salesperson who seeks to close a sale and one who seeks to open a relationship. Becoming a guide requires a profound shift in the seller's identity. It means letting go of the need to always have the last word. It means putting ego aside to listen without judgment, without haste, and without a hidden agenda. It means being present, not to convince, but to understand. Because the customer isn't looking for quick answers. They're looking for someone who dares to enter their chaos calmly. Who can sustain their doubt without impatience. Who can earn their trust not by what they say, but by how they make them feel. In this context, true power lies in listening. Not in oratory, not in technical knowledge, but in the ability to be truly attentive to what the customer is saying, and also to what they aren't saying. Active listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about capturing emotions, interpreting silences, reading between the lines. It's about being completely present, without thinking about what you're going to say next. And although many consider it a lesser technique, it's one of the most powerful tools in the art of selling. Because when you listen deeply, the customer feels it. And when the customer feels you're truly listening, they begin to relax, to trust, to open up. The mask of the skeptical customer is dropped, and the human being who needs help, direction, and clarity emerges. In that space, true selling happens. The kind achieved not through pressure, but through presence. The customer doesn't want to be sold to, they want to be understood. And when they feel that, they lower their defenses and become receptive. Listening with intent doesn't mean simply staying silent. It means demonstrating with your body language, your gestures, your questions that you're connected. It means validating what they're saying without rushing to correct or respond. A phrase like, "What you just said is important, I want to fully understand it," is worth more than any technical argument. Because it communicates respect, attention, and humanity. And in the world of sales, humanity is rare and, therefore, valuable. People don't want to buy from machines that repeat benefits. They want to buy from people who reflect understanding. Building real trust doesn't take weeks. It can be achieved in the first 5 minutes of a conversation if you know how. Trust isn't created with a speech. It's created with energy. With the way you walk, greet, look, speak, and move. The first key is authenticity. Being yourself, without exaggerating, without feigning an attitude that isn't yours. The client detects falsehood faster than you imagine. The second key is focus. Being genuinely interested in the person in front of you. Not just in their business problem, but in their story, their motivation, what they want to avoid, and what they dream of achieving. Sincere interest is magnetic. And the third key is clarity. Don't beat around the bush. Don't try to sound more sophisticated than necessary. Express ideas simply, directly, and transparently. Clarity breeds calmness. And when the client feels calm with you, they'll follow you. A guide doesn't need to have all the answers instantly. What they need is a commitment to finding the best answers together with the client. That creates a partnership. And in that partnership, the sale happens naturally. Because the client doesn't feel like you win if they buy. They feel like you both win if what you propose truly solves their problem. That perception completely changes the game. There's no longer mistrust. There's collaboration. There's no longer hard negotiation. There's joint value building. The salesperson who acts as a guide differentiates themselves from the first minute. They don't speak more than the customer. They speak just the right amount. They don't interrupt. They probe. They don't rush the process. They pace it. They know that rushing destroys connection. And that the customer, even if they don't say so, is observing everything. Your tone, your attitude, your consistency. They're evaluating whether to trust you or not. And you, in those minutes, are seeding what their decision will be. Not with pressure, but with presence. The consultative approach isn't a gimmick. It's a way of being. It requires self-confidence, but not arrogance. It requires authority, but not imposition. It requires a deep understanding of the human being beyond technique. Because what the client needs isn't just to solve an external problem. They need to feel that you understand their internal situation, their fears, their doubts, their tensions, their desires. When you achieve that, the sale is no longer a battle of arguments. It's a natural consequence of the connection you've created. And that connection is only possible when you decide to stop acting like the expert who has to prove something, and start acting like the guide who accompanies with humility, listening, and purpose. Being a guide isn't being passive. It's being precise. It's choosing your words with intention, your silences with intelligence, your questions with strategy. It's knowing that the client doesn't need someone to tell them what to do, but someone to help them discover what's best for them. And when you become that person, trust becomes immediate. Respect appears. The decision becomes fluid. Because at that point, the client doesn't feel like they're buying. They feel like they're moving forward. And moving forward is what we all want. Especially when we feel that someone, finally, is walking with us and not in front of us. That's the power of consultative selling. And that's the most powerful role you can choose as a salesperson, to be a guide, not a sage. A human, not a machine. A companion, not a superior figure. Because when you position yourself there, everything flows. And selling, quite simply, becomes inevitable. Chapter 7. Price, Value, and Perception. Price isn't the real obstacle in most sales. What truly determines whether someone buys or not is the perception of value. This simple idea completely transforms the way a salesperson positions themselves when faced with a common objection like, "It's expensive." Because the truth is, no one buys simply because of price. People buy when they feel that what they receive is worth more than what they deliver. If the customer perceives that the value is greater than the price ceases to be a barrier. But if the value is unclear, any figure will seem high. So, the right approach isn't to lower the price, it's to raise the perception of value. And that perception isn't based only on what you offer, but on how you communicate it, how you present it, how you make the customer feel. Salespeople often fall into the trap of competing on price because they haven't learned to communicate the true value of what they offer. They think that if they don't lower the price, they'll lose the customer. But what they're actually missing is the opportunity to educate the customer about what's at stake. Lowering the price is easy, but it's a sign of weakness when not accompanied by a strategy. Increasing value is the smart and sustainable path. And the most powerful thing is that you can increase the perception of value without changing the product, without adding anything material, just by changing the way you present what you already have. Because value isn't just in what's visible, but in what the customer understands, imagines, and feels. To increase value, you first need to understand what value means to each type of client. For some, value lies in the time they save. For others, it's in the peace of mind they gain. For still others, it's in status, exclusivity, ease, and support. There's no single formula. That's why it's vital to discover what each client truly values. And once you've identified that, connect your proposal directly to that value. Don't say, my service includes this and that. Say, this will allow you to achieve that other thing you want so much. Don't say, the product works like this. Say, this means you'll avoid that other thing that bothers you so much. It's a subtle, but radical change. You're not selling features. You're selling implications, personal benefits, emotional transformations. Another element to increase value is the way you structure your proposal. Don't present everything at once. Do it in stages. Create a narrative. Take the client on a mental journey where they can understand how each part of what you offer connects to a direct benefit. For example, if you're selling a consulting program, don't simply say, includes 5 sessions and WhatsApp support. Say, we'll work in stages. First, we'll identify the real problem. Then we'll create a personalized strategy, and you'll have constant support to ensure results. It's the same product, but told with intention, with order, with clarity of impact. And that, inevitably, increases the perceived value. It's also crucial to use intelligent comparisons. When justifying your price, don't defend it in a vacuum. Compare it to other, less effective options, to the cost of not acting, to the time wasted in failed attempts. For example, you can say, there are people who have spent years trying to solve this on their own, spending time, money, and energy to no avail. This solution allows you to make progress in weeks, not years. How much is that worth to you? You're using context to give weight to your offer. You're making visible the hidden cost of not taking action. That gives urgency and relevance to the price you're displaying. The art of justifying your price with authority doesn't mean sounding arrogant. It means speaking from a place of certainty. Certainty that what you offer has a real impact. Certainty that you're not selling something off the cuff, but a proven solution. Certainty that you know how what you do transforms lives, businesses, routines, and mindsets. That certainty is conveyed in your voice, your body language, and your gaze. Customers don't buy just from what they hear. They buy from what they perceive. And when they perceive that you're convinced of the value you deliver, that energy influences them. Because deep down, we all want to be sold from a place of confidence, not insecurity. And that starts with you. A powerful tool for reinforcing value is sharing real-life stories. Stories from previous clients, testimonials, before and afters. Concrete stories turn abstract value into something tangible. Don't just say, this works really well. Say, I'll tell you what happened to someone in your same situation. Emotional identification makes the value evident. The client begins to imagine themselves experiencing that outcome. And when they feel that, price becomes secondary. Because what they want most isn't saving money, it's getting out of the problem. What they want isn't paying less, it's achieving more. Avoid justifying your price with constant discounts. Because when you do that, the customer learns not to value your offer at its true price. They learn to expect discounts. They learn that the initial price was inflated, and that damages your brand, your authority, your market position. A good salesperson doesn't negotiate from need, they negotiate from value. If you're going to give something extra, do it strategically, not out of insecurity. And if you ever adjust your price, do it with reason, not out of pressure. Because every time you lower your price unnecessarily, you're also lowering your perception of power with the customer. Remember, the client isn't looking for the cheapest option. They're looking for what generates the most trust, the most clarity, the most impact. And you can be that option if you know how to build value into every word, every sentence, every interaction. Don't expect the client to automatically understand what you know. Your job is to make the invisible visible. Make the intangible tangible. Translate benefits into emotions. Connect numbers with personal results. When you achieve that, the price isn't defended. It's understood. It's accepted. It's paid with pleasure. Ultimately, price is just a number. What makes it acceptable or unacceptable is the story that accompanies it. And you are the narrator of that story. Use every conversation to build value, not to justify it. Use your presence, your language, your questions, and your clarity to make the customer see your price not as a cost, but as an investment. A smart, necessary, urgent investment. When you change that perception, you change everything. Because now the customer is no longer asking, how much does it cost? They're asking, how do I get started? And at that moment, the sale is already made. Chapter 8. The Power of Questions. In the world of sales, questions are not a weakness. They are the most powerful tool a salesperson can master. Contrary to what many people think, asking questions isn't about losing control of the conversation. It's about taking control in a subtle, elegant, and strategic way. Because those who ask questions direct. Those who question guide. Those who have the courage to dig deeper not only understand the customer better, but also help the customer understand themselves better. And when that happens, when the customer discovers things they hadn't articulated before thanks to your questions, a high-impact connection is created. You become the person who helped them see what they weren't seeing. And that is infinitely more powerful than any sales pitch. Most salespeople speak too soon. They launch features, prices, benefits, without asking the essential questions. Without exploring what pains the customer, what frustrates them, what has them paralyzed. And that's where they lose. Because selling isn't a transfer of information, it's a revelation of needs. And those needs are only revealed if you know how to ask. Asking is showing genuine interest. It's giving the customer space to reflect. It's putting the focus on them, not on you. It's allowing the conversation to revolve around their story, their desires, their obstacles. And when you do that well, when you make the customer feel understood to a level no one has before, what you offer becomes immediately relevant. It's no longer just another product. It's a tailor-made solution. Every sales conversation should include a set of key questions that open the customer's mind and connect them emotionally to their current situation. Questions like, what frustrates you most about your current situation? What impact is this problem having on your daily life or your business? What have you tried so far to solve it? What were you hoping would happen that didn't? How would you feel if you could solve this today? What's preventing you from taking action now? These questions not only reveal valuable information, they also raise awareness. They get the customer to verbally articulate their pain, their desire, and their blocks. And that process of verbalization is profoundly transformative. Because many times, people don't take action simply because they haven't put their feelings into words. You, as a salesperson, can be that verbal mirror. Furthermore, questions are the secret weapon for dismantling objections. Because behind every objection lies an unspoken truth, an unexplored emotion, a misunderstood doubt. And you won't uncover it by arguing. You'll uncover it by asking. If a client says, I don't have time, instead of justifying yourself, you can ask, what's taking up the most of your time right now? Or, what would happen if this were to continue the same for the next 3 months? If they say, I'm not sure, you could ask, which part is causing you the most doubt? Or, what would you need to be clear about to make a decision with confidence? Every question unlocks a layer. Every good question brings the truth closer to the surface. And once the truth is on the table, selling becomes simpler, more direct, more genuine. But it's not just about asking the right questions. It's also about asking them with the right tone. A good question asked in a hurry can sound aggressive. Asked with empathy, it can sound like an act of respect. Asked neutrally, it can sound like professional curiosity. Tone is everything. Because the client doesn't just respond to the question, they respond to the intention behind it. If they sense you're trying to explain, they'll close up. If they sense you're trying to understand, they'll open up. That's why the power of questions isn't just in their content, but in the energy with which you ask them. There's a category of questions every salesperson should master. Those that reveal priorities. Because often, the client is confused. They have several problems, several objectives, but they don't know which one to address first. Your job is to help them sort things out. Questions like, if you had to solve just one thing this month, what would it be? Or, what part of your current situation keeps you from sleeping peacefully at night? These questions focus on the essentials. The client begins to filter the urgent from the secondary. And when that happens, your offer, if aligned with the priorities, immediately gains value. There are also questions that trigger desire. Questions that make the customer imagine having already solved their problem. For example, if this were already solved, how would your daily life change? Or, what would be different for you if you could achieve that goal that now seems distant? These questions transport the customer's mind to a desired future. And from that emotional state, the openness to buy increases exponentially. Because people don't buy based on logic, they buy based on emotion. And those emotions are activated when the customer connects with the possibility of improvement. Now, one of the most common mistakes is questioning without listening. Asking questions in series, without processing the answer. That doesn't create connection, it creates distance. The secret is to listen to each answer as if it were a clue, and build the next question on that foundation. It's an organic, living conversation, not a form. If the client tells you, "What bothers me most is feeling like I'm always starting over," don't move on to another question without digging deeper. You can say, "What do you mean by starting over?" Or, "How has that been for you emotionally?" It's in those layers where the information that really drives decisions appears. And when you get there, you're not selling a product. You're guiding a transformation. Why the power of questions isn't just in what they provoke in the customer, but in what they transform in you as a salesperson. Because when you ask with intention, you stop selling blindly. You start selling with precision. You stop pushing and start accompanying. You stop chasing and start attracting. Because people sense when someone truly wants to understand them. And that feeling of being understood is so powerful, so rare, so valuable, that it's often all they need to say yes. So sharpen your questions, but above all, sharpen your intention. Because the right question, asked from the right place, has more persuasive power than any aggressive closing. Questions, when used well, don't just sell. They transform. And that is the true art of influence. Chapter 9. Pressure-free closing. The closing moment shouldn't feel like a battle, a forced negotiation, or an act of emotional manipulation. In fact, if you came to the closing feeling like you had to push the client, it's likely that something wasn't deeply worked out in the previous process. Closing well isn't about forcing a decision, but rather facilitating it. Closing, when done masterfully, occurs as a natural consequence of a well-guided conversation, a well-built connection, and a well-transmitted value. There's no need to beg, plead, or force. It requires clarity, intention, and trust. Because the client, when they truly feel that you understand them, that your solution aligns with their problem, and that you offer a concrete solution to their situation, doesn't need convincing. They need internal permission to say yes. And you can help them find that permission, but you can't impose it. One of the most common mistakes salespeople make at the closing is shifting energy. Throughout the conversation, they've been calm, empathetic, and focused on the customer. But when it comes time to close, their tone becomes anxious, their language becomes aggressive or overly technical, and the emotional experience they had built up is shattered. This disconcerts the customer. It's as if they suddenly feel like the entire previous conversation was just a prelude to manipulation. Therefore, closing without pressure means maintaining the same emotional coherence throughout the entire process. It means the closing doesn't feel like a trap, but rather a logical extension of everything already discussed. The customer must feel that you don't need them to buy, but that you're willing to help if they decide to move forward. That feeling of emotional freedom, paradoxically, is what is most convincing. When you sell from pressure, the client activates their defenses. They begin to look for excuses, to distrust, to postpone. But when you sell from presence, from calm security, from certainty without aggression, the client relaxes. And it is in this state of openness that the best decisions emerge. One of the most powerful resources for closing without pressure is the reverse close. Having the client tell you why they want to move forward. After thoroughly exploring their situation, you can simply ask, "With everything we've discussed, what part of this solution do you think would help you the most?" Or, "How do you feel this fits with what you're looking for right now?" These questions get the client to articulate their desire. And when they say it out loud, they begin to convince themselves. You're no longer selling. You're guiding a decision. Another elegant technique is closing from a shared decision. Instead of saying, "So, are you buying it?" you can say, "Would you like to start working on this together starting this week?" That small change completely shifts the energy. It's no longer about whether or not to buy. It's about starting a process together. This creates an emotional bond and softens the perception of risk. Or you can use phrases like, based on everything we've discussed, I feel you're very close to a decision. What would you need to be clearer about to feel fully ready to move forward? This question opens the door to the last subtle objections, the unspoken fears, the small doubts that often hold back big decisions. And you, as the salesperson, are there not to pressure, but to clear up those doubts with honesty, empathy, and precision. Closing without pressure also means maturely accepting that not every client will say yes, and that's okay. When you need to close to feel validated as a salesperson, your energy changes. Your communication becomes contaminated by urgency. But when you know that your value doesn't depend on a sale, but on your ability to serve, connect, and communicate truthfully, then you become free. And from that freedom, you can be more authentic, more influential, and more effective. Because the client doesn't feel like you're selling, they feel like you're offering a possibility. And that makes all the difference. There are phrases that, when used at the right time, invite the client to move forward without feeling pressured. For example, if we decide to start, this would be the next step. Or, based on what you shared with me, this is how we could help you move forward more quickly. Notice that there is no pressure, only clarity. Just a natural presentation of the next step. Other times you can ask, do you feel like this resolves what's blocking you the most right now? And then remain silent. That silence isn't manipulation, it's respect. It's space. It's giving the client the opportunity to listen to themselves, to decide from their own center. Emotional closure is when the customer doesn't feel like they've bought something, but rather like they've chosen. And to achieve that, you must have connected not only with their logic, but with their story, their pain, their desire for transformation. If you've guided them through that emotional journey in a conscious, authentic, and respectful way, the closure happens fluidly. Because you're no longer pushing a decision, you're accompanying an internal change. You're no longer negotiating a product. You're activating a new possibility in their life or business. That's the magic of the no-pressure closure. It doesn't feel like a closure, but like a beginning. And when the customer feels that, their decision is not only faster, it's more solid. Remember this, you're not there to close sales, you're there to uncover realities. And realities aren't imposed, they're revealed. Your role as a salesperson isn't to push, it's to bring clarity. It's not to force, it's to raise awareness. And when you do it right, the customer doesn't need convincing. They just need to feel ready. And if you've guided them to that point, the closing is no longer your responsibility. It's their choice. And that, when it happens, is more powerful than any technique, any script, any limited offer. Because you didn't sell, you helped decide. And that way of selling not only closes more sales, it builds relationships, reputation, and respect. Everything a true salesperson needs to grow without limits. Chapter 10. Elite Salesperson Mindset. The difference between an average salesperson and an elite salesperson isn't in the products they offer, or even in the techniques they know, but in how they think, how they feel about themselves before selling, how they react to challenges, and, above all, how they decide to act each day. Mindset is the arena where the real game of sales is played. It's invisible to others, but completely decisive for results. Great salespeople aren't simply good at closing deals. They're exceptional because they've trained their minds to see opportunities where others see rejection, to get up when others stop, to continue believing when others give up. They've understood that the most important sale they'll make each day is the one they make to themselves. The one of continuing to believe in their value, in their process, in their ability to transform lives through what they offer. An elite salesperson thinks differently because they aren't defined by yesterday's results. They aren't swept away by rejection or the momentary thrill of a big sale. They have emotional stability because their identity isn't tied to what they close, but to who they are while they're trying. They know that every no is part of the journey, not a sign that they should give up. They know that objections don't invalidate them, but rather train them. They think with perspective, not anxiety. They don't seek immediate gratification, they seek to build a reputation. While the average salesperson obsesses over the monthly goal, the elite salesperson obsesses over the process that will help them grow over the next 5 years. This difference in focus creates a huge gap in long-term results. Great salespeople also act differently. They have habits that sustain them, mental rituals that strengthen them, and internal rules that are non-negotiable. They don't rely on daily motivation because they've built discipline. They know that some days they won't feel like making calls, presenting proposals, or dealing with uncertainty, but they'll do it anyway because they understand that consistency is more powerful than emotion. They prepare before each conversation, not just with data, but with intention. They visualize the impact they can generate. They train their emotional state to enter with presence, not anxiety. They don't improvise their energy. They know that the way they feel directly influences how the client will feel. One of the golden rules they follow is this: the client is always infected by your energy. If you're insecure, they will be too. If you're tense, they'll feel it too. But if you're clear, present, and focused, the client perceives it as confidence. And confidence sells. Because people buy when they feel they can trust you. Not just your product, but you as a person. Your calm, your confidence, your commitment. That's why elite salespeople cultivate an unshakable mindset. They don't let a bad week destroy their vision. They don't let a difficult client steal their focus. They don't let a pending commission make them doubt their path. They know who they are, and that sustains them even in the most uncertain moments. Mental habits are an essential part of that strength. They begin the day with clarity, not chaos. Some meditate, others write, others review their goals, but all have a way of centering their minds before heading out onto the field. They review their beliefs, remind themselves why they do what they do, and reconnect with the purpose of serving, not just selling. Because they understand that if they forget their why, their how becomes fragile. They also take care of their environment. They don't surround themselves with negative people who constantly complain about the market, customers, or the competition. They surround themselves with energy that expands them, challenges them, and uplifts them. And if they don't find that environment, they create it with books, with mentorship, with content that strengthens their vision. Another powerful habit they practice is constant learning. They don't assume they already know how to sell. They know that every new client is an opportunity for improvement. They analyze their conversations. They ask themselves what they could have done better. They celebrate their mistakes because they see them as training material. And when they have a victory, they don't rest on their laurels. They analyze it to replicate it, to understand what caused it, what part of the process was key. They don't leave their success to chance. They dissect it, repeat it, systematize it. But perhaps the most notable trait of an elite salesperson is their attitude. Because attitude, more than knowledge, more than experience, more than technique, is what opens or closes doors in the world of sales. The attitude of genuine enthusiasm, resilience, humility to keep learning, and firmness to not give in to doubt. The customer senses it in seconds. They may not be able to explain what they felt, but they'll know it was different with you. Because you didn't sell out of desperation. You sold from certainty. You didn't act with urgency. You acted with presence. You didn't react. You responded clearly. That attitude conveys leadership. And people want to buy from someone who makes them feel guided, not pressured. That's why the product you sell is important. Yes. But the attitude with which you sell it is what makes it desirable or not. You can have the best offer in the world, but if your energy conveys need, doubt, or insecurity, the customer detects it. And conversely, you can have an average product, but if your attitude is solid, confident, and empathetic, the customer will be open to listening to you. Because in the end, people don't buy what you sell. They buy how you make them feel when they approach you. And if you are a channel of clarity, of possibility, of inspiration, then your mere presence will trigger decisions. That is the mindset of the elite salesperson, knowing that the true product is you, and working on yourself every day as your best investment. Selling isn't just a profession. It's a mental game. It's a field where you compete not only with other salespeople, but with your own mediocre version. And if you decide to rise above your fears, your excuses, your sabotaging habits, then you position yourself in a league where you no longer depend on the market, or luck, or easy clients. You depend on yourself. And when that happens, selling becomes inevitable, because your mindset is no longer negotiating with reality. It's creating a new one. One where you are cause, not effect. Where you lead, you don't survive. Where you choose to grow without asking permission, without looking back. That's the difference. That's the mindset that turns an ordinary salesperson into an unstoppable force. Conclusion. You don't sell little, you sell badly. Now that you've traveled this path, you can't go back. You can no longer hide behind common excuses, nor blame the market, nor the difficult client, nor the price, nor the competition. Because now you know the truth. You're not selling poorly because the world is against you, you're selling poorly because you didn't understand the game. Because you hadn't trained your mindset, because you hadn't fine-tuned your listening skills, because you hadn't learned to connect before convincing. And that truth can hurt, yes. But it's also liberating. Because it gives you back control. Because it puts the responsibility in your hands. Because it shows you that you don't need to wait for perfect conditions to start winning. You just need an internal decision to rise up, to take yourself seriously, to become conscious. Because everything you didn't know, you now know. And what you know transforms. You can't ignore that selling isn't about sweet talk, it's about diagnosing accurately. That it's not about offering products, it's about offering possibilities. That it's not about closing with pressure, but about opening with presence. That your voice, your energy, your focus, your ability to ask questions, your emotional strength, all of this is more influential than any catalog or promotion. You can no longer ignore that customers don't want experts who impress them. They want guides who listen. That the real objection is rarely price and almost always a lack of emotional clarity. That profound questions are worth more than brilliant arguments. And that what sells the most is not what you say, but how you make the other person feel when you say it. All of this is already within you. You've seen it. You've understood it. You can no longer pretend you don't know. Real change doesn't begin when you close more sales. It begins when you change the way you see yourself as a salesperson. When you stop begging for attention and start building authority. When you abandon the need to be liked and choose the path of impact. When you decide that you're not here just to survive, but to influence, to guide, to serve from a higher place. Because selling with power isn't selling from ego, it's selling from truth. From the awareness that what you do transforms lives. That your work isn't just commercial, it's emotional, psychological, and human. Because every time you sell with truth, you help someone move forward. And that turns your role into a mission, not a chore. That's your new mission, to sell with truth, with power, and with purpose. With the truth of knowing who you are, your worth, and what you offer. With the power of a trained mindset that doesn't break in the face of a no. And with the purpose of elevating every conversation, of leaving every customer feeling better, of making every interaction meaningful, even if it doesn't end in an immediate sale. Because when you act from that energy, you don't just close sales, you open doors. You don't just generate revenue, you build trust. You don't just win over the customer, you win over yourself. And that's where everything changes. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new way of selling. More conscious, more human, more strategic. You are no longer an average salesperson. You are a builder of possibilities. An agent of change. A professional who understood that selling isn't a struggle, it's an art. It's not an obligation, it's a privilege. Because if you have something that helps, that transforms, that improves the lives of others, then you have a responsibility. Learn to communicate it with impact, with clarity, with confidence, and with respect. That is your mission from today. And if you decide to take it on with conviction, with courage, with humility, then prepare yourself. Because what's coming isn't just growth in results. It's an evolution in who you are. And that, when you embrace it, there's no turning back. Now you know. And that knowledge changes you forever. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue delving deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I'll see you there.